Listening to podcast is no replacement for real training. While we attempt to provide accurate commentary, we hold no responsibility on how you use the information we provide. Get medical training. In the blink of an eye, everyday order can be replaced with once-in-a-lifetime chaos. Be prepared. This is the Civilian Medical Podcast.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Civilian Medical Podcast. My name's Dietrich, Skinny Medic on YouTube. My partner in crime here, Sean from We Like Shooting. How was your holidays, Sean?
Pretty dang awesome, man. Got to sit around a lot and relax a lot and even take a nap every now and then. So it was pretty great. How was yours?
It was great. Did your girlfriend get you something cool?
Yeah, she got me lots of cool stuff.
You're just gonna leave us hanging like she's
my absolute favorite thing that she got was she put together this big collage of pictures of us and it was all sweet, and then she had a big print made so I could hang it up on the wall.
Aww.
I liked it a lot.
Maybe she does love you.
Maybe, I don't know. You never know.
You never know. So we have another return guest. We we're running short on people, so we're like, hey, my friend Bobby might want to come back on. So we got Bobby Wells back on today. We're going to talk about traveling, and I think Sean travels a good bit. Bobby travels a lot internationally, so I think this is going to be a cool episode, talking about what to think about if you're going to be traveling this next year. Think about internationally traveling, or even traveling in the United States. Some things to think about, what you can carry, what typically gets taken away from you, and then overseas, how to get to help, thinking about an ambulance, hospital settings, things like that. So I'm looking forward to this episode.
Yeah, I totally am too. And I think we briefly touched on it, but I think really some of the stuff I am very, very, very curious about. And I know that I get a lot of questions like, oh, I'm going to travel. What kind of stuff can I carry? Not just gun stuff, but also medical stuff. So I think it's kind of something that I'm glad that we're going to dive just a little bit deeper on and kind of see where we go. Bobby, how was your holidays?
I had a very good holiday. Similar to yours, it was nice and relaxing. We didn't travel. One of my travel recommendations that I'll give you today is not to do it over the holidays.
That's a great point.
Just too many people moving, too much frequency of traffic interruptions and weather and all of that nonsense. It's just not worth it.
Yeah. I despise traveling on big holidays and things like that. I've done it twice, and hopefully when I die that it's still at twice. I don't know if I'm going to do it again. Dietrich, where do you want to start?
So, thinking about, traveling internationally, a lot of big questions I get is about when you get on a plane, what can you take and what is not a good idea to take on a plane, your carry on, things like that. So, I've traveled some, and typically what I take is a stop the bleed kit, a tourniquet, pressure bandage, some gauze, and some tape, some things like that. Just some very minimum things that I think I may need. But I don't really typically carry a whole lot when I'm going on a plane. I don't really take trauma shears, and I joke around about it. And here's a secret, and Bobby's probably the same way. When I'm on the ambulance, I don't carry trauma shears like I used to. Back in the day, I had the Raptor shears. Every single ambulance call I had trauma shears, and now when I'm doing search and rescue or TAP medicine, I do carry trauma shears. So I may be the only medic there, but if you're on an ambulance or you're doing something, usually there's someone who has a pair of trauma shears. You're like, hey, can I have a pair of scissors? And 4 pair get handed to you. So I'm like, I don't even carry that stuff anymore. I barely carry my radio. I kind of skip out on the trauma shears when I'm traveling, but usually it's basically a stop the bleed kit.
Yeah, for me, when I travel, so I have lost several pairs of shears, but I literally, when I'm about to take a trip or something, I just put the $1.50 shears in there, and they cut pennies. I've actually done it, so I think they're okay. I don't know how important they are, but I do carry them. I've lost them a couple times. However, the last 3 or 4 times that I've traveled with shears, I haven't lost them. So I think I'm going to continue to do that. And then decompression needles, I generally have those in my kits, and I generally take them out before I travel. But I think I'm just I've got a couple that I've opened. I think I'm going to start trying to see kind of where that goes. I'm going to put one in the kit in my backpack and one on my ankle kit, and just kind of see if they take them. And if they do, cool, no big deal. And if they don't, then that's just another thing that I could possibly use if I ever needed to and chose to and wanted to take that risk. Bobby, how about you? What about sharps and things like that?
Well, there's a little bit of a difference whether you're traveling within the US or outside.
Mm-hmm.
The nice thing for us is TSA does publish their requirements online, so you can go on pretty easily and see what they require. They're pretty hesitant to let you carry any sort of knife or fixed blade device, no matter how short the blade is. With scissors, they do say it has to be less than 4 inches from the pivot point to the tip, which most trauma shears would fall under that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the additional benefit of the trauma shears is that they have a blunt end, so it would not be an efficient stabbing weapon. So they seem to be a little more flexible with that, according to the policies that they have on their website. I don't carry shears myself when I fly. I have used medical kits a few times on flights, and when I've done that, they have always had shears in there. So I feel that that's typically going to be something we have available.
Yeah, one other thing that I actually forgot to mention is on all my med kits, I have a Rescue Me, which is like a seatbelt cutter / window glass breaker. I generally take those off. They're like $12 each, but I'm probably going to throw those on as well and just kind of see and make sure I get to the airport extra early, just in case. If they want to take them, that's totally fine. I understand. I'm not trying to like push the boundary too much. I'm just trying to figure out what is acceptable. What do I need to take off? But do you guys carry any of those, like glass breaker, seatbelt cutters, anything like that?
I don't typically. I'm pretty slack about that kind of stuff. So maybe I need to look at carrying it. I'm just like trying to get through there. I'm like, we got 2 kids and like MJ's trying to tear the place apart when we go through there. I'm like, so Engage is all like stalking people, ready to snipe somebody in the head. So I'm like, come on, bud, you can't shoot TSA like that. Don't do it. So I'm just trying to get there as quick as possible. So I'm pretty slack about what I'm carrying. Just a quick thing that popped in my head. You're talking about you've used a couple of kits on airplanes. I've never really thought like what were in the kits, Bobby? Like when they brought, like, I guess brought them to you or you went to them.
Typically what will happen is they will call over the loudspeaker and ask for a healthcare provider. Sometimes they'll specify doctor. Typically in the US, they will just say a healthcare provider. Other countries where there's a larger difference between the scope of practice of a doctor and a paramedic or nurse, they'll specifically ask for a doctor, but they're usually not going to turn you down if you say you have medical training. After that, they'll direct you to the patient, you go to the victim, start assessing them. You can ask for the med kit, or often they'll just have another flight attendant bring it at the same time. So it'll get to you pretty quickly. Most of the kits have blood pressure cuffs, IV bags, some of your basic cardio medicines, and some shears, some bandages, things like that. But they're not very involved. And it's not always really well thought out what they put in there specifically. For example, I was treating a patient a couple of years ago on an American Airlines flight. And when they brought the kit to me, they gave me a blood pressure cuff that was in there that was fully automatic. But with the noise or the movement of the plane or something, it wouldn't read a blood pressure. And that was the only cuff they had. They didn't have a traditional manual cuff that I could use, which is what I really wanted. And they had the cheapest stethoscope that you could possibly find at the dollar store or somewhere. And with the extra noise of the plane, it was impossible to hear. So I would say that if you're planning on doing a legitimate assessment and you have the training to do that, carry your personal stethoscope. That's one thing I can't imagine that anyone would have a problem with going through security in any country. And I have never seen a decent stethoscope in an airline kit.
Do they have an AED typically? You think? I would assume they would.
Most of them have an AED. Some of them have semi-automated defibrillators that will work as an AED, but you can also see the rhythm because they acknowledge that a lot of these people are healthcare providers that are responding, and they want them to have that additional information. Almost all airlines have online medical control. So if you have a complicated situation or the patient doesn't seem to be stable, you can talk to the flight attendants. They can relay information to the pilots. And in certain circumstances, they'll even connect you directly to their medical control on the ground. And they will make the decision whether to divert the flight to a closer destination or to have you keep going. And they can also give you some guidance on what you can do on the airline and what you can't.
That's pretty cool. And I would assume that, we would be, because we're talking civilians, then, basic care, they're not going to be doing anything crazy. But, basic first aid, whatever the Good Samaritan laws would cover guys that like, hey, look, I've had some first aid training and no one else steps up, which is a possibility. That, you would still be covering Good Samaritan laws and things like that. So
yes,
I would just call
even some
additional,
additional leeway that they have legally in the air. I don't remember the exact specifics about it, but it definitely covers you to the extent of the Good Samaritan law within the U.S. airspace.
Yeah, that's what, especially if you're on the phone with a doctor, you're like, hey, doc, I've had CPR, I've had basic first aid, I need some help. And the doc would walk you through it, and you would be fine. So
nice. Yeah, that and then Bobby, did you answer? Do you carry seatbelt cutters or glass breaks, anything like that?
I do not, and I definitely don't carry them when I get on an airplane.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely have a problem with those personally. So I'm going to take the one that's the most beat up because I'm sure it'll end up in a trash can in TSA.
Yes.
Or some dude from TSA will be like, look at this cool glass breaker I got.
I'm pretty sure they have a lot of good things.
Yeah, I know they got a $400 knife from me once that I accidentally left in the backpack. I was like, all right, well, that's my life now.
Yeah, Dallas got some of my ammo when we flew out of NRA. I was pissed, but I flew out, no problems the way I had the ammo packaged. And then when I flew out of Dallas for NRA, they pitched a fit. So I not really threw, but I spread out my federal 9mm all across the counter and said, here you go, you can have it.
Bye-bye, it's trash now.
Yeah. The good thing was I posted that on Instagram. I was like, screw y'all. You can have my federal 9mm ammo, 115 grain. And then federal sent me an Instagram message, said, hey, here, what's your address? We'll send you a couple boxes. So it was fine. I was like, forget y'all.
I've been told I go through security in London a lot, and they've told me that they keep an eye out for flights from Dallas because they routinely find ammo in the carry-ons, which is not legal there. You can't import handgun ammo into the UK.
Wow.
And so they know when there's flights coming from Texas, there's a increased chance that there may be some loose ammo in the bottom of the bag.
Yeah, we went through DC. Like I was scrounging around trying to make sure I did not want to get caught with, a spare round or something stupid in there. And then we were up in Maryland, and I said something, and I think it was on Instagram, and another YouTuber sent me a message. It was like, hey, dude, we have some really strict gun laws. Like, this is the rules. And he's like, if you get caught, you're coming to my gun range. Perfect. So, cause we had just went into Maryland for like lunch or something like that. I'm coming right back out. And I was like, okay. But still, like just traveling, obviously with a firearm, it can be bad. You got to make sure you know the rules and things like that. But a lot of places, like you were saying, you can't carry a firearm. So having medical is the next best thing for you and your family to protect themselves.
Yeah,
definitely.
So what kind of things do we do to prepare for going to international destinations as far as, maybe even start with like, what kind of shots do we get ahead of time? What kind of medical gear do we carry? What kind of things may they be more concerned about overseas than we are here? Just kind of all that stuff.
One of the things that like I don't do international travel, but just kind of like around the States, Kenneth and I will go follow the local news media. If we're going to a city that we don't, haven't been to, haven't heard of, kind of unfamiliar territory, we'll go like their news stations on Facebook. That way we can kind of see what's going on. If you can see, what there's trouble, things like that. So it's just kind of you can kind of follow social media of the city and see what's going on, kind of get a heads up if there's going to be trouble in the city or if there's rising crime or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Bobby, what are your thoughts here?
Well, one quick step back to what you carry on the plane with you. The one other component that I would add with that is to carry proof of any training that you do have. So whether you're a licensed healthcare provider or whether you're a civilian, that you have some first aid training or some CPR training, carry that with you on the plane. They really appreciate that, especially if they're starting to make some decisions about whether to divert the plane and land or whether to keep flying, or the medical director is trying to decide what to do. They often will ask the flight attendant to confirm some sort of licensure with you. For me, I carry the National Registry app on my phone, so I can just pull that up and show them my National Registry card. But if I were first aid trained or something like that, I would want to make sure that I had a copy of that card at least emailed to me or on my phone or something. That gives you some credibility so that they know that you are not just winging it and having fun playing MacGyver.
Could you like pull up the YouTube app and show the Skinny Medic channel and say, "Hey, I watched this guy."
I'll try that next time.
Try. Let me know. Like, hey, I watched this guy. And see what they say.
I'll show the Civilian Medical Podcast hoodie that Dietrich has, and I'll be like, "Look, I'm the fat one."
Oh, that's funny. That's a great hoodie, by the way. I love it.
It is good. I need to order one. What kind of preparations?
Yeah, safety prep. So particularly if you're going overseas or anywhere that you're going, you need to have a plan. Overseas, I would start the plan by going to the U.S. State Department's website. They have a country-by-country listing of every place that you need to go. So whether you're going to Italy or Cambodia, it'll tell you this is what you need as an American to get into this country as far as visa requirements, things like that. It'll also tell you if there's known outbreaks of any diseases or anything in that area. And it gives you a pretty good idea of what kind of safety risk you might be looking at as far as protests or riots or kidnapping or anything along those lines. Some countries require immunizations, and that information is also listed on the U.S. State Department's travel website if it's required. But there's a lot of immunizations that you'll want to get that are not required. I go to a travel doctor here in Dallas about once a year and get up to date on all my shots. So I'll get like 8 or 9 really random immunizations, Japanese encephalitis and yellow fever and all these really horrendous diseases that I don't want to get.
No,
I was very excited to see there's now going to be an Ebola vaccine as of last week. So I'm very, very happy to see that. Because that's something I don't want to pick up along the way.
Yeah, if you catch Ebola, you're not allowed on the podcast anymore.
Right.
You don't even want to talk to me remotely.
We're not even talking to you remotely. I don't want to get.
I've heard about those computer viruses. Get out of here.
Yes.
Terrible.
That's why I use a Mac.
So that's the first step of planning. And then you want to look at where are you staying? Are you staying at an Airbnb with locals at a hotel? Large hotels often have some resources for you, but it's good to have a plan before you go. Know where there's some reliable hospitals nearby, know how you would get there, know what the emergency numbers are. The State Department also has a list of emergency numbers in most countries. That's very helpful to look up before you go. I think the most common number is 999, but depending where you are, it could be just a straight 10-digit phone number. In some countries, they don't have an emergency number, and so you have to know to dial the right 10-digit number to get an ambulance. So the first part is knowing how to activate the ambulance. Then the second part is knowing essentially whether you would even want to call an ambulance or whether you would want to try to get evacuation to a hospital yourself. Because there's a number of countries where you may wait hours for an untrained crew to come get you and take you to the hospital. There's also options in some countries where they will have a public ambulance service, and there are private hospitals that are for pay that you could call and order an ambulance from, and they would come get you. And in most cases, I would fork out the extra money and get a private ambulance to come get me and take me to their hospital, as opposed to being at the mercy of the public health system.
Yeah. I play hockey with a guy whose wife bashed her face into like a watercraft, like one of the jet ski things, while they were in Mexico. And he said that the medical seemed okay, but it was kind of like it was a little bit of a disaster money wise, because they ended up having to pay like a ton of money, and they were paying like U.S. rates for Mexican healthcare, which is kind of weird. And I think it was like $4,000 they had to pay before they would even let her out of the hospital. So it almost seemed a little bit like they were holding them ransom. He said, but yeah, that's freaky stuff.
It is very common that you have to pay cash or, with a credit card or something to get medical care in your own socialized healthcare system. If you're a citizen of the country, you have access to get into that healthcare system. But if you're not a citizen, if you're just visiting, then it's you have to pay to be treated. My most recent experience of that, unfortunately, as a patient, was this summer. I was in Singapore and ended up in the ER due to some sinus issues, and turned into pneumonia and ear problems. So it cost about $1,000 up front to pay for x-rays and a consult with an ENT and an emergency room visit. Fortunately, because I travel for work, we have an insurance policy that covers that, so I was reimbursed later on.
That's good.
But I did know that I needed to be prepared to pay up front when I got there.
That's
Man.
crazy.
Yeah, it really is. Because I mean, there's a lot of people that like don't have that kind of money sitting around, right?
Right.
And they're like $1,000. I got a really good deal on Travelocity to go to the Bahamas or whatever it happens to be, and I've got enough to drink every day by the pool and have dinner. Like I know a lot of people travel like that, which also freaks me out and fills me with anxiety.
Yes.
But yeah, like $1,000, like cash up front. I think that would really screw over a lot of people, honestly.
It would be difficult. I think that if I am talking to someone who's traveling overseas for the first time, I like to tell them you need to have two things on you at all times. You need your passport and a credit card, and preferably make sure that credit card has a few $1,000s worth of a credit limit on it. Particularly the more that's important, the more incident prone or dangerous the places that you're going to. If you get into a place where you're out away from your hotel and there's some sort of revolution in the country or a riot, you just want to go straight to the airport, whip out that credit card and buy a ticket out of the country. Doesn't even matter where you're going. A lot of people experienced that in almost a decade ago now, when the Arab Spring started in Egypt. There were a lot of people visiting there, seeing the pyramids, doing the tourist thing. Revolution started from their perspective almost overnight. Most Egyptians would say it had been brewing under the surface for years, but to the tourist perspective, things were very quiet. Then all of a sudden there were riots and gunfights in the streets. And for those that had the means, that's what they did. They would just go straight to the airport. You can leave all your stuff at the hotel, just get out of town. You need a passport and a credit card. And it's the same with the emergency room. When you go to the emergency room, those are the things you're going to need. So make sure you have those on you at all times.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, I'm looking at the State Department's travel website. It's freaking me out.
It does.
That I never looked at this before because I would never travel anywhere out of the United States.
I have looked at it a few times and really second guessed whether I should go somewhere. But I've also looked at countries where I have visited, maybe developing countries that I felt perfectly safe in. But then I read the State Department's description of the country, and was wondering how I made it out of there alive.
That's what
they do is they take any report of incidents involving tourists and they include that in there, and they don't necessarily have a validation step to say this actually happened. So there is an incident that I know of in Cambodia about 12 years ago that was reported on the State Department website for a long time, and then it turned out that it had just been, the whole thing had been a sham, basically, to try to get some insurance money. But it had been featured very heavily on their website because it was this very atrocious sounding crime against an American tourist. Yeah. And so you do have to be a little bit skeptical when you read things like that. But at the end of the day, remember that you're thinking of hundreds of thousands or potentially millions of tourists going into this country every year, and you're reading 6 descriptions on the website.
That's true. That's true.
That's kind of like if someone internationally watched the news about the United States and saw like all these murders and like stuff happening in like across the United States, you would think the United States is just like the Wild West for shooting each other out. And really, it's not that big of a deal. I'm perfectly safe all the time for the most part. So I think it's kind of like that too. Like we see like the stuff that makes the big national news media about what's going on in a particular country, and ultimately it's fine. It's safe.
Yeah, I was in South Africa a few years ago, and one of the paramedics there said, "So as a paramedic in the U.S., how many gunshot wounds do you treat in a day?" And I was like, "A day? Like one a year?" And he said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Because from what I see on the news, it seems like you guys would be treating gunshot wounds and blast injuries all the time." I said, "Well, first, I think a lot of people's impressions about America come from Hollywood, and Hollywood does not represent real America. And then just the things that happen to make the international news, like you said, are not usually positive things."
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. I still don't know how I came back alive from any of these places. It's ridiculous. I'm never going to that website again. I'm going to block it real quick.
Right.
So I just can't do it.
You just need like a warm blanket and cuddle up when you read it.
Yeah. Let's see. So is that all we wanted to cover on the safety preparations?
Well, I think I'd like to visit a little bit more on the whole idea of making a plan, particularly if you're with family.
Yes.
I typically travel by myself, so it's pretty easy. I have one person to take care of, and I get to the airport and I leave. With a family, it's a bit different, particularly if you're not going to stay together the whole time you're there or divide up. You need to have a plan, know where to go. My wife grew up overseas, and her parents had a plan all the time. They said, there's money in this drawer. If anything happens and you can't get in touch with us, you don't know where we are, here's the money. This is how you get to the airport. Go home. And that's, I think, a good idea to have with your kids, is to kind of talk through all those issues. This is what you do if there's an emergency. Know how to call the police, know how to call an ambulance, know how to find the hospital. And if you're going to any place where you're doing hiking or anything remote, or you're going to a country where the healthcare system's not very evolved, you need to have some sort of evacuation and repatriation insurance, so that you have a number to call and they'll tell you how to get those resources, or they will get those resources to you. Going back to Egypt, I'll mention a couple of companies, but I won't necessarily be endorsing any of them. But I do know there's a company called Global Rescue based out of New England that had a number of customers. So with them, you pay upfront, you pay a yearly fee, and you get medical and or security evacuation from a country. So if you're climbing Mount Everest and you fall and break your leg, they will help coordinate to get you down to a place where they can get a helicopter in. They'll get you to Kathmandu, and then they'll fly you out once you've been stabilized and get you back to America. And if you paid up front, all of that's free. And when Arab Spring came about in Egypt, they chartered a whole jet, because they had so many customers over there, landed it in Cairo with armed guards on it, loaded a bunch of people up, and flew back to the US. So if you're going to any place where you think you may need to have some sort of really robust security plan, there's, so Global Rescue was one, International SOS is another. There's a company called Red Point Resolutions that also does that. Again, I'm not recommending any of them, but I think all of those are kind of in that evacuation field.
That would be a cool job.
Yeah, those companies have a lot of job openings for current, former paramedics, current, former military, and it's a pretty interesting looking field. They do a lot. If you Google some of the companies, there's news articles that talk through how some of them evacuated people out of Nepal during the earthquake years ago, and various other things. It's very interesting to see the logistics that go into getting a person out of a country.
Yeah,
I've had two friends that use that type of insurance, that type of company. I have one who was a missionary in South Africa, and they got in trouble, and they were getting the threat of getting kidnapped. And then she ended up getting kidnapped. They called the company right before, like, hey, there's trouble with this tribe. We were afraid we were going to get kidnapped. We need to get evac'd out. And by the time the company landed, they had been kidnapped. So middle of the night, they're in a little small building, and somebody kicks the door open and says, hey, we're Americans. We're here to take you guys home. And come to find out, the Southern Baptist Convention had actually hired this company, paid for everything. And so I was like, that's pretty sweet. Like, you get to kick in the door in the name of Jesus. You're like, cool, let's kick the door in. That was pretty cool to see that. And, that she was very thankful for that company to come and get her, because they were wanting money, they were wanting ransom. And so the company was able to come in there and take care of it and get them home. And then I have another friend who is a professional kayaker who got really sick, and maybe in yellow fever. It was some kind of fever, like some kind of like weird stuff.
Dengue fever.
That's yes. And so she got some kind of fever, and she was super sick, and she obviously has that insurance because she's traveling the world kayaking, and the medical team flew in, picked her up, flew her back on a fixed wing. I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't even know this existed. I could have been kidnapped. I could have died. There's crime everywhere. I'm never traveling again.
Sean's gonna have PTSD by the end of this. Yeah. From all the things that could have happened.
He's not gonna fly to South Carolina anymore.
No, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying in Colorado forever.
That's it.
Oh man, yeah. So the plan that's I actually didn't realize how naive I was about like everything that I should be doing before I travel internationally. And
Yeah, and there's some places you go where there's a reasonable expectation that something could happen, and
Mhm.
you want to be on high alert. And then there's other places where you may go and things are perfectly calm, but it changes very suddenly. A few years, I think it was in 2011, I went to Bangladesh for the first time, and I was just there for some meetings with a hospital group, and everything was calm, everything was normal. And then the morning that I had a meeting, their stock market crashed, and there were a lot of people in the country who were blaming this on fraud within the financial industry. So they went down to the financial district of the capital city of Dhaka and started, trashing cars and blocking the road and setting fires and things like that. And it turned out that the path from my hotel to the hospital was directly through the financial district, and none of us knew what was going on until all of a sudden there were hundreds of people running around, throwing rocks into windows, and our driver was trying to find some back roads to get us out of there and going down alleys, and it was a bit touch and go for a little while. But that was the first time that I really started thinking, I really need to have a plan for this, because there was no warning. There was no, even on the State Department website, Sean, there was no warning that was going to happen. No expectation. And so I got in this situation where I didn't really have a way out. I had left my passport in the safe at the hotel. And so I knew that any reasonable path out of the country involved me either going back to the hotel or going to the U.S. Embassy and getting an emergency passport. So that was the first one that really kind of woke me up and made me think that I needed to have a plan.
Yeah.
Incidentally, it's actually fairly easy to get a new passport at the American Embassy. I had
It's a
to do
pain
that
in the
a few
butt to get
years
one
ago.
here in the States.
Yeah, it's not cheap, but it's relatively easy. A few years ago, the State Department accidentally canceled my passport and reported it as stolen.
Oops.
Very, very nice of them. And I was on my way to South Africa with a long layover in London. I had a friend in London, so I'd emailed him and said, "Hey, let's get lunch." And so I flew into London and went to clear immigration, and the immigration lady got a very funny look on her face and did the, "Can you wait right here for a minute, sir? I'll be back in a minute."
Dang it.
Oh no.
Run.
And so of course then she comes back with some additional people, a supervisor and
She
a
called
guy
backup.
who looks suspiciously armed under his jacket. And they moved me into a different room, and they started peppering me with questions. Who are you meeting here? What are you doing? So I had to pull up all of my emails and show them, this is the person I'm meeting. This is the arrangement we made. Here's my itinerary. I'm continuing on to South Africa this evening, and all of this exciting stuff. And then they finally told me, well, your passport's been reported as stolen. And I had ID with me. I had my driver's license. I had my U.S. global entry card. So I had other forms of ID to prove that I was who I said I was. I had passed through London dozens of times in the last few years. So eventually they actually let me into the country, surprisingly. But the lady said, "I would recommend that you go right to the U.S. Embassy and get this fixed." So I did. I went to the U.S. Embassy, and once your passport has been reported lost or stolen, they can't undo that. So they couldn't just uncheck the box in their system. And so I went into the embassy, and as soon as I handed the passport to the guy and he swiped it, he said, "Yep, this has been reported as stolen. I can't give this back to you. So you're going to have to wait here until we make a new passport." So they had a little photo booth. I went and got
Can I
my
get a
picture
cup of coffee
taken.
or
And about 2 hours later, they handed me a fresh new passport with a 1-year term and let me go.
Wow.
So yeah, I was glad I got to London and figured that out instead of getting all the way to South Africa. And then if they had put me on the next plane out of the country back, it would have been pretty awkward trying to get back to the US. It's a long ride.
Ugh.
No doubt. That is nuts, man.
I would probably recommend people too to have paper, maps and stuff like that. You were talking about maps and phone numbers, stuff like that. I would write that on paper and have actual hard copies of maps and stuff like that, because I wouldn't probably want to rely on my phone to be able to pull maps back up or pull that would scare me, kind of pull emails back up or notes I wrote in my phone about phone numbers to call. So I probably would recommend people have hard copies of that.
Right. I did have, so I keep a lot of that stuff offline on my computer. So I'll save my itineraries and everything offline as well. I don't always print up paper versions, but at least if I have it offline on my computer, I don't have to worry about connecting in order to get that and show it to someone.
Definitely.
Craziness. Yeah. So I'm gonna get maps tattooed on myself before, just because I could lose paper or it could get wet. I don't know. It's
Get your
crazy.
back shaved and just start.
Yeah. It's so funny how you think you're prepared, right? Like I train with firearms a lot, I train medical a lot, I like do all these things, and I'm like, I'm woke AF. And then I'm like, no, I'm traveling like a dang idiot. And yeah, no, I'm just a moron. That's what I am. A moron.
So I don't like traveling at Christmas because of all the rookie travelers, and now it turns out you're one of them, huh?
Yep. Well, apparently, which is crazy. I've got TSA pre though. I mean
That's one good thing.
I had clear, but for an entire year, every airport that I flew to didn't have clear yet. So I let it lapse, and now I see clear everywhere. So I need to get it again. But yeah.
I think TSA pre-check is definitely the way to go. And if you travel overseas, if you register with Global Entry through the immigration department, you get both Global Entry and TSA pre-check. So you get to essentially skip the line coming back into the country as well.
Nice.
Very good. Yeah, that's awesome.
I live in Dallas, so it doesn't make a huge difference here because their customs area is very efficient. But if you're flying back in through LA or Miami, the customs halls there are just a nightmare.
Miami.
It saves just a ton of time. Yeah, Miami's a disaster.
It is a disaster. Yeah. I was like, I still laugh because they take a picture of you when you come back into the country, and it was printed on something. I don't even remember what it was. And I looked so mad and annoyed. And I was like, this is the perfect representation of how I felt going through customs in Miami. It was awesome.
Have you seen the new facial recognition stuff that they're using to get you on the plane now?
No.
So this is interesting. They've just started recently. I've only had it happen one time, but they have a computer screen at the gate, and instead of scanning your boarding pass, you just walk up, you look at the camera, and the facial recognition says, okay, this is Bobby Wales. He's in seat 22F. He's clear. It just in seconds. You never hand your boarding pass over, nothing. So they've started rolling that out at a few airports around the country, and it seems like it's super reliable. The one time that I went, I stood in line, watched about 15 people in front of me go through, and it didn't hiccup for anyone, and went right through.
Man,
it's a little bit creepy, but a little bit interesting at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes me a little bit anxious as well. I don't know what's going on.
Have you watched the Black Mirror series on Netflix?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, you shouldn't do that.
It's on my list for literally years.
Every episode is some sort of technological advancement that goes wrong or is used in a way to oppress people or things like that. I've had a lot of friends that have watched it in its entirety and then deleted every social media account they had and went back to a flip phone. And
I believe it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see how it could all go wrong.
Yeah, which is crazy because I have an IT background, and I stay pretty abreast of all that stuff and all the abuses of Siri and Apple's voice stuff and Google's voice stuff and everything else. So, but then clearly it doesn't concern me as much because I have those devices in like every single room,
right,
of everything that I do. So yeah,
they're definitely listening to us.
Oh yeah, without question. I'm on so many lists. I'm sure.
It's amazing you have pre-check.
And an FFL and an SOT. Like I am one of the most background checked individuals in the universe.
The FFL one, I'm like,
well, the ATF guy that's assigned to you is going to listen to this podcast and be like, "Oh, I forgot to take his pre-check away."
Yes,
I know.
You can edit that out if you don't want to give him any ideas.
That's fine. It's fine.
We'll just say hey to the ATF and hey to everybody listening right now.
The CIA. We had a guest on once who had formerly worked for the CIA, and literally the next day after he was on the show, he got called in for a lifestyle polygraph.
Oh, nice.
Which meant that the CIA had followed that, listened to the entire show. I'm like, okay, well.
That makes you feel better.
Yeah, note to self, no more people like that on the show.
Right.
We don't need extra attention. All right. Have we covered the plan well enough?
I think the one other thing I would say with that is avoid any sort of demonstrations or political rallies or anything like that if possible.
Yeah, I don't even go to this here.
Yeah.
Brian, don't wear your Trump 2020 shirt.
I don't wear anything that identifies me as an American. In a lot of cases, I don't even like to wear a ball cap because a lot of people overseas don't wear them. So particularly if I think I'm going to be in a country where people might be interested in targeting Americans, I won't wear anything that that identifies me as, you know, being a Boston Red Sox fan or something like that, because that's somewhat indicative of my nationality. I've fallen short. I have a few coworkers that will actually wear stuff with a Canadian flag on it to basically say, "Don't hurt me. I'm Canadian. Don't blame me for Trump or whatever." But I've not gone that far yet. But I would definitely say if you find yourself in the middle of any protest or rallies, to find your way out of it as quickly as possible. I did have an incident a few years back where I was in Turkey during the presidential campaign, and I didn't think anything of it. I wasn't planning on going to any rallies. And I got woken up in the middle of the night by noise outside the hotel, and they were constructing a stage there was a little square outside my hotel. And by the next morning when I woke up again, there were about 50,000 people in the square and spilling down the roads. And apparently the candidate for prime minister was speaking there that day, the lead opposition candidate. And there were snipers on all the rooftops everywhere around us, and there were riot police everywhere. And it ended up being a very, I mean, there's a lot of yelling and all of that stuff. But it ended up being a pretty quiet event.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
That could go bad quick though. That kind of stuff. 50,000
Yes.
people. That's
a lot of people.
We
We did not leave the
couple of them
hotel that day.
yeah. It's
We stayed in the hotel. We were teaching classes in the hotel, so it worked out pretty well. We didn't have to leave, and that was just something we avoided. It was very peaceful at the end, but it was a little bit worrisome.
Yeah, that could definitely go bad quick. All right. That is very good stuff. My eyes are open, so I'm sure our listeners are definitely. And I know people go like international a lot, right? Like Mexico and the Dominican and the Bahamas and like all the Caribbean places. So
Like even going on a cruise, you know, things like that. So
yeah, I did
Right.
like a year ago, and we were in, I don't know, like 3 third world countries. So yeah,
So, like, we went on a cruise a couple years ago, and they were like, "Oh, you don't necessarily have to have your passport, but if something bad happens, it's probably a good idea." And like Kenneth and I immediately went and got our passports. I was like,
yeah.
because knowing my luck, like that would be something stupid, like just something dumb happened, and now I don't want to be stuck and can't get home. You know, you can get. It's just a pain in the butt, so it's worth just getting the passport, things like that, just to be able to get home.
Yeah, and I like to do stuff. I don't remember which country it was in, but I like to do some of the excursions that are like canned and safe and other stuff. But in another one, I just like walked to a local marketplace and rented a Jeep and just drove around the entire island all day by myself. And it was awesome. It was one of the best experiences of my entire life. But I did prepare. I had medical gear. I did have a pocket knife. Like I had a hidden pocket knife. I did have paper maps. I did have stuff printed out. I had passport and ID stored in 2 separate places. So I was prepared, I thought, to a point, but yeah, still have a lot of stuff that I need to add to my planning.
One of the things we kind of touched about is like the ambulance. You know, how you said there were different numbers, things like that. And typically here in the U.S., when you call an ambulance, you're going to get either an EMT or paramedic. Most places you get a paramedic, but you know some places, you know, depending on what the call nature is, you may just get an EMT, like a basic truck. We may get a paramedic, but you know some countries have physicians that are on the ambulance, and like you were saying, Bobby, some not any trained. So kind of looking ahead and being prepared about how to call for an ambulance, and then knowing what to expect when the ambulance shows up.
One of the recommendations I have about picking a hospital is to go on the Joint Commission's website, Joint Commission International, and look at the hospitals that they accredit around the world, because they have to meet a certain standard, and it's the same standard no matter where you are. And then with each reaccreditation from JCI, they have to show not just a maintenance of a standard, but they have to show improvement, whether it's patient safety or reducing the number of bad outcomes during procedures, things like that. So it's at least, it may not mean you're going to get a perfect medical treatment, but it's an indicator that this is a quality system that is looking at improving their quality. On the EMS side, they've just started to get into accreditation of EMS systems as well. I think they have maybe half a dozen I think they're all in Ireland or the Middle East that they've accredited. So I would start with that, and I'm hoping that continues to expand, because that would give you a much better idea of where you would want to, who you'd want to call if you need an ambulance in a specific country. Otherwise, you're just at the mercy of whoever is sent by the local dispatcher that you call.
I want to
Another
say
part of looking at
Ghostbusters
the
so
plan-
bad there.
Right. Who are you going to call? One part of that plan is looking at where the closest hospital is to your hotel that you would want to go to, and then seeing if they have an ambulance that can come get you. Because often with private hospitals around the world, they can do that.
Yeah, so we kind of covered that. We talked about the hospitals. Anything like what about like surgeries? Like, if, say you were having like knowing my luck, I would have a heart attack overseas, and now I've got to have a heart catheter, or I fall and I break my leg really bad. Sean's four-wheeling, he breaks a leg, and he needs surgery. Is it probably obviously I guess different countries are different ideas, but would it be better to have the surgery there, or like try to get back to the United States and have surgery? Like, what's the thinking?
I think that's the value of some of the evacuation programs, is that they can consult with the doctor wherever you go. So if you go to the emergency room in the country where you are, they can consult with them, look at what your actual situation is, and say evacuation would be better. Often they won't evacuate you necessarily all the way back to the US for a procedure, but they may evacuate you to a nearby country that has better healthcare facilities. There are entire countries that don't have cath labs. And so if you need to have a cath done, they will evacuate you to another country nearby that does have a good safety record, or at least the hospital has a good safety record with caths. They'll do it there and then evacuate you back to the US. But unless you're a healthcare provider who's well-versed in treatments and global health and things like that, that's not a decision that you want to be making yourself. So, outsource that to a company that does that professionally.
Yeah, there was a local firefighter here who was, I believe he was on a cruise, was in the Bahamas and had a stroke.
Oof.
And their stroke protocols were not as aggressive as what they probably should have been, and they set on him. And so he went from being an active firefighter to had to medically retire and is in therapy and just is in really bad shape now. Where if he would have had the stroke here, he probably would have been, who knows what happened, but good chance he returns to work, or
Right.
Is back doing whatever. And they let him sit in a bed for hours having a stroke, and we're like, oh, and they couldn't get him out of the country, stuff like that. So it's kind of scary to think about stuff like that happening. But I think, like you were saying, if we're more prepared going into it, thinking about which hospitals are nearby, what their capabilities are, how to get an ambulance, and having, I would definitely look at insurance if you travel a lot. So that can be that plan can definitely help us out
Yes.
if we're going to travel.
What's the name of some of those travel insurance companies again?
So the companies that provide evacuation and repatriation would be International SOS, Red Point Resolutions, and Global Rescue are the ones that I'm most familiar with. There's also a group here in the US called MedAir that does it. They're a subsidiary of International SOS. So I'm not sure exactly how the plan works if you have one with MedAir, if it's applicable everywhere else. And then there's a number of other companies that do just medical insurance. So they won't necessarily evacuate you back to the US, but they will pay for your treatment wherever you are. I know for corporate clients, AIG is really big in that area. There's a group called Ripcord that's good for people that are really into adventuring, or people that are really going out and doing extreme sports that probably will need help. It's a bit more aggressive type of plan. And then Cavalry is another one. There's a number of different providers that provide specific medical insurance for individuals.
Yeah, I want the one that has a team of operators kicking a door in to rescue me.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm too pretty to rot in a hostage situation or anything like that.
The podcast world would not be the same without you, Sean.
It would be so much better though. Oh,
I just need a number to a couple of people so I can keep doing this podcast. I'm okay. I need some help doing this.
exactly. Aaron's got all the passwords.
That'd be fine. He probably doesn't remember them.
No, he definitely doesn't. That is nuts, man. So International SOS, Red Point Resolutions, and Global Rescue. I wrote them down.
I'm sure that's not an exhaustive list, but those are the ones I'm most familiar with.
Yeah.
It's a good start for Sean.
It is, yeah. When I have to get all this cool insurance next time I go somewhere.
So maybe for this next year, I'll send you a list of the places that I'm going, Sean, and you can pick one of those to go with me.
Okay.
So you feel safe. I'll take care of you.
That would be better. That would be way better.
Y'all
My
be a good
superpower is
team.
finding good restaurants. So that's what I do well.
All right. And I eat a lot. So it's
Hey, me too.
yeah.
Sean could provide security. Bobby provides the medical. Like y'all start your own company. I'll go do it. Just kicking your own doors.
I love it.
That's right.
Except I don't know. I don't know that I could really kick in a door. That just sounds like a lot of work.
You can kick it like a single wide trailer door. Like that's pretty easy.
You know, I might have a headache. Like my shoulder might be sore. I don't know.
I mean, do like the single wide trailer, like the shack. Like you can start there, and then you move up to like the double wide trailer. Then you move up to like the stick brick house, and then when you get really buff, you can try to come kick in Kenneth's door.
Okay. Oh, I've seen the guns you have.
Yeah, she's standing on the other side waiting on you.
Yeah. With like one of these. Where is it? There's my camera.
Yes.
Yeah. I love this gun with a burning fiery passion. They must be right because I really feel manly when I hold it. So
Kenneth's got one of those. she's shooting the same gun.
yeah. I mean, mine's got like all the attachments on it.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. But yeah. Anyway. Let's see. Excuse me. What else did you guys want to cover? We've covered a lot of stuff, which I think is awesome.
We did. I don't think I can't think of anything else I'd like to cover unless Bobby's got something he wants to finish out with.
Yeah, man.
I think that's it on my list.
All right. That's amazing. Proof of training. That I took that down as a note too. I think that's hugely important. Just like scan any certificates, certifications, things like that, and just keep them maybe in a folder that you save to your phone. Doesn't have to be a lot, right?
Right.
Some people it's going to be like a lot more than others, but yeah, anything that you have and any of that stuff, keep it, scan it, be able to show it on a phone. And you said, do you have a printout or you use that app, right?
I just use the registry app on my phone. Yes.
I laminate
That's a
everything.
good point.
It is, yeah. I laminate everything, like even little signs. I've got a sign over by the trash can that says, if you don't help take the trash out, take your trash home with you. It's laminated. I'm just crappy. But yeah,
Hey, you have to come up with shortcuts as you get older.
right. I'm like, I take out the trash like 75 times a week. I'm not the only person here, but I'm the only person that takes the trash out. So yeah,
Nice.
cranky, passive aggressive signs is what I've resorted to in my life.
God, you're such a cranky old man.
I know it's great. So hopefully the people who listen, hopefully this helps them a lot. I know lots of people travel internationally, so now some extra things to think about. And don't let it stop you. Like don't let fear control your life, but definitely be prepared for the worst, right? Like that's why we talk about guns. That's why we talk about medical, and it's why we talk about all these other things is to try to kind of help give people an idea. I got a lot of feedback today on the show that we did last night on We Like Shooting, because we really broke down the Texas church stuff, and a lot of people were like, hey, I'm really thinking now that I really need to practice. They see the guy who fails his draw, and that makes them worry about it. And that's exactly what I hope for, because they worry about it. They practice more, and maybe they're more adept if their worst day ever comes. So I think that's good. That's what the point of this episode was for. medicalgearoutfitters.com, where you can get all the stuff that we pretty much talked about in the show as far as like kit and gear and all that good stuff. I know I ordered and gave trauma kits as Christmas presents that I ordered from Medical Gear Outfitters. That was a great idea. They went over really, really, really well. And you can use coupon code Civilian Medical for 10% off. And I am actually in the process of ordering my Ballistic Ink Civilian Medical Podcast t-shirt right now. I was going to get the hoodie, but I've got so many hoodies and I wear t-shirts more, like this March t-shirt that I'm wearing right now from the Skinny Medic store. And just go to Ballistic Ink. Do we have a coupon code for that?
I don't think so.
Okay,
We
cool.
should probably work on that, but we don't.
Go buy it. Quit being a cheap guy.
Yeah, it supports the podcast, so it supports Sean and I both helping with the podcast. So
it is. And my favorite part about you and I, because we even pay for the t-shirts and hoodies and stuff. And the best part is then we get a commission check.
yeah, it works out.
Dietrich bought that hoodie and then I got paid for it, which is fantastic.
Ridiculous.
I want him to order all the stuff. Bobby, where can people find out more about you and keep up with your travels and just like whatever you post online?
I'm on Instagram, rstantontx, and then I'm on Twitter at Bobby_Wales, WALES. And they can find me on LinkedIn by searching Robert Wales.
Very cool.
There's not a whole lot of whales. I think pretty much it's just a small group of us. The only person who's really famous is Jimmy Wales, who founded Wikipedia, but the rest of us are all pretty insignificant. So if you Google for me, it doesn't take too long before you find me.
Yeah, that guy's always, that Jimmy Wales guy is always asking me for money. Every time I go, always asking me for money. I don't know. And it's WALES, just to be clear. Not
like the country, not the animal.
Exactly.
You're going to have to post more food pictures. People are going to want to see your food since you said you were an expert at finding good places to eat.
I'll see what I can do. I always try to remember if I find something that's really interesting looking to eat, but sometimes it just looks so good I start eating first and then forget.
I have that.
I went to Kazakhstan earlier this month, and their specialty there is horse. So I thought about posting some pictures of the horse that I ate. I mean, not the actual horse, but the horse meat.
Say alive or dead.
But I was a little worried about the backlash I might get from some family and friends. So I've not decided on that yet. I may post it yet.
I eat camel, and I would highly suggest nobody ever eat camel. It is awful meat. It is nasty. I don't know why people would eat that. Or maybe they don't. It was roadkill. I found it. Whatever.
Well, my rule of thumb is to always eat everything twice in case it wasn't made right the first time. So, give it one more shot. Maybe you had a bad chef the first time and see what happens.
I love it. Skinny Medic, any final words before we leave?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Bobby, do you remember when you were in town, we went and ate sushi, and Gage was probably 2 years old, and took him with us, and he ate sushi with he was flirting with the waitress.
Yes.
And he's like 2 years old.
Flirting with a waitress.
Yes. He had a thing for blondes, platinum blondes. If they looked like a stripper, he loved them. It was kind of awkward. It was fun. And so he's 2 years old. He is flirting with the waitress, and she brings him back sushi rolls with sushi rice and sugar sprinkled on top. And he ate them. That was his first time he ever ate sushi.
Sounds amazing.
I think we developed quite the addiction to sushi when we were hanging out together. So we used to eat a lot of sushi, and I still do. Now my kids are obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Every year for their birthday, I tell them we'll take you out to wherever you want. And, my 5-year-old is not picking McDonald's. He's asking for sushi. Yep. I consider that a parenting win myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Although McDonald's is all right. I'm kidding. It's awful. Don't ever go there.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming back on, Bobby.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah, no problem.
And
sure we'll have you on
we'll talk again soon.
Sooner rather than later.
Yes.
Maybe even this afternoon. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We'll talk to all of you next week. Don't forget medicalgearoutfitters.com and check out the Firearms Radio Network, firearmsradio.tv. We're out.
Find us and subscribe at civmedical.com.